I stepped into the dining room, the familiar scent of roasted chicken mixed with something sharper, tension, thick and unspoken. My parents were already there, sitting at the polished table with the smugness that had always made my chest tighten. Before I even hung my coat, my mother shot me a glance that carried the weight of disappointment I had grown up swallowing. "Still at that dead-end job, I see," she said, the words falling casually, like tossing scraps to a dog. My father smirked, shaking his head. "Maybe one day you'll do something useful, but don't hold your breath." I forced a smile, a reflex I had perfected over years of rejection. Across the room, my older sibling sat smiling, basking in the quiet praise I had never received, the golden child again. I felt the familiar pang of being invisible, dismissed, and underestimated. Yet deep inside, something stirred. A quiet, simmering determination that tonight the old scripts would start to crack. I pulled out my chair, bracing for the evening ahead, aware that every word, every glance, would be a reminder of the role I had been forced to play for years. As I settled into my chair, the words my parents had just thrown at me lingered, echoing louder than the clinking of silverware. Almost instinctively, my mind drifted back to my childhood, to the countless times I had been overlooked while my sibling basked in attention. I remembered my 10th birthday, the cake barely touched because they were too busy photographing my brother blowing out candles. I remembered the science fair, where my project was praised politely but ignored in the photo albums, while his first-place trophy took center stage. Even little everyday victories like learning to play the piano or winning a school essay contest were met with a pat on the head and a passing good job, never the proud applause or words of encouragement I craved. Meanwhile, every success of theirs was celebrated as though the sun itself shone just for them. The contrast burned into me, and the unfairness of it all tightened my chest. I had learned to swallow the sting, to smile and nod, to hide the hurt behind polite laughter. And yet as the smells of dinner wafted through the room, the old ache returned, sharper this time, mingled with a quiet determination that tonight, the past would not dictate my future. The first course had barely been served when the jabs began again, sharper this time, aimed squarely at me. My mother picked at her salad, eyes narrowing just enough to make her words sting. "Still renting? I thought at your age you'd have something to show for yourself." My father laughed, loud and exaggerated, glancing around the table to make sure everyone heard. "And that boyfriend of yours, he's not exactly a step up, is he?" I felt heat rise in my chest, a mix of shame and simmering anger, but I forced myself to sit still, nod politely, and swallow the lump in my throat. Every dig at my finances, my relationship, and my so-called lack of accomplishment felt like knives, twisting a little deeper with each passing moment. Across the table, my sibling smiled, oblivious or perhaps complicit, basking in parental approval while I shrank in my seat. I wanted to speak up, to defend myself, but the words died in my throat, replaced by a tense, trembling restraint. I couldn't believe they were treating me this way. Yet somewhere beneath the embarrassment and anger, a spark ignited. This time, I would not be dismissed so easily. As I pushed my untouched plate aside, my mind drifted to everything I had done for this family, the countless sacrifices they seemed to forget. I thought about the extra hours I had worked to help pay for my siblings' college tuition while scraping by myself, the nights I stayed home instead of going out because my brother needed a ride or support, the holidays I skipped to make sure everyone else had what they wanted. Every milestone I had quietly achieved, promotions, personal growth, small victories, had been met with polite nods at best, barely a word of acknowledgement. And yet, they paraded my brother's successes as though he alone carried the family's pride. Why him? Why did he get their applause while I worked tirelessly, stayed late, gave up so much, and still felt invisible? The unfairness gnawed at me, churning into frustration, hurt, and a slowly forming sense of strategy. For the first time in years, I realized that their dismissals didn't have to be the end of my story. If they wanted to treat me like I was nothing, then it was on me to turn that perception upside down. And tonight, I would begin. I took a deep breath and let the words roll off me like water on stone. Their insults, meant to provoke, no longer pierced me the way they used to. I smiled politely, nodded, even laughed lightly at the jabs, but inside every nerve was alert, every thought focused. They thought they had me figured out, that my silence was weakness, that their ridicule had won, but I wasn't reacting the way they expected. And that control gave me a quiet, almost intoxicating power. Each comment they threw felt heavier for them, not for me. My mind ran through every past slight, every overlooked effort, and a plan began to crystallize, subtle but precise. They had no idea I was gathering all their arrogance, their overconfidence, their underestimation of me, and quietly stacking it like a reservoir behind my calm exterior. By the time dessert arrived, I had rehearsed the words I would say, the impact they would have, and the moment I would finally shift the balance. They didn't realize I was planning something. As the conversation meandered, the comparisons began again, sharper this time, aimed to emphasize my failings. My father leaned back, chuckling, recounting my cousin's recent promotion as if it were a personal insult. "And here you are, still struggling to get a decent bonus," he said, eyes flicking to my mother for confirmation. My mother joined in, recounting my brother's latest achievement, the way he had bought a new car, traveled, and attended glamorous events. All proof, in their eyes, that I was falling behind. I sat still, letting their words wash over me, tasting the bitterness that had followed me since childhood. But beneath the sting, my mind sharpened. Every boast revealed cracks in their perception. Every praise for someone else exposed their hypocrisy, their favoritism, their inability to recognize effort or loyalty. I recalled all the times I had worked silently, sacrificed for the family, and been brushed aside while they celebrated others. Anger coiled in my chest, a tight, controlled fury, and anticipation surged with it. They had no idea how wrong they were, and every word they spoke only strengthened the resolve quietly building within me. By the time the third course arrived, more relatives and a few close family friends had gathered, and with their arrival, the barbs grew louder, sharper, more performative. My parents leaned into the attention, relishing the small audience, mocking my life choices with a confidence that stung like acid. "Still renting? Still struggling," my mother said with a laugh, glancing around to ensure everyone caught the jab. My father added, "Honestly, I don't know why we even bother expecting anything from you." I felt my cheeks heat, a wave of humiliation washing over me, and for a moment, I imagined standing up and storming out. But instead, I held my posture, my calm smile masking the whirlwind of anger and disbelief inside. They underestimated me, and every insult only made the coil of planning tighter, more precise. With each public dig, I collected evidence of their arrogance and my own composure, knowing that these very people would witness the reversal soon enough. In that room, surrounded by onlookers, I realized that tonight's humiliation was not the end. It was the perfect stage for the reckoning I had been quietly crafting. After the main courses were cleared, and the laughter of my parents' guests faded into the background, I retreated inward, letting my thoughts run unchallenged. I thought back to all the times they had been overconfident, believing their words could break me, that their mockery had power over me. I remembered holiday dinners where they assumed I was powerless, family events where I was dismissed as incapable, and moments when their pride made them blind to my quiet achievements. Each memory fueled a growing clarity. The perfect moment would come, and I would strike not with anger, but with precision. My confidence swelled as I realized that tonight, I held the advantage they could never anticipate. Their arrogance, their underestimation had created a stage, and I was ready to command it. Every insult, every slight, had been a setup, and now, in the quiet of my mind, I mapped the line I would deliver, the line that would shift the balance forever. My father's voice droned on about how I would never amount to anything, how my choices were a disappointment, and for a moment, I felt the familiar sting of humiliation rising. But instead of reacting, I let the words pass over me, controlled and silent, while the room buzzed with their smug satisfaction. Then, in the quiet between their sentences, I spoke, calm but deliberate, letting each word land like a hammer. "Funny, isn't it? How I've been supporting my own life, my brother's education, and even your favorite charity for years. Yet somehow I'm the useless one at this table." A hush fell. My parents' smiles faltered, eyes darting toward each other, and the guests leaned in, sensing a crack in the polished performance. I continued, steady, unwavering. "I suppose you never noticed because it wasn't flashy enough to parade, or maybe you just assumed I'd never succeed. Well, I did, and I'm done waiting for your approval." Shock rippled through the room. The confident posturing, the casual mockery, they crumbled in an instant, replaced with stunned silence. In that moment, every ounce of restraint, every measured thought I had held back, paid off. The balance of power had shifted entirely, and I finally felt the intoxicating rush of vindication. The room seemed to freeze. My parents blinked, mouths opening and closing like fish, words caught somewhere between pride, disbelief, and embarrassment. My brother shifted uncomfortably in his seat, eyes darting between me and them, unsure if he should defend, apologize, or pretend nothing had happened. Relatives leaned forward, faces painted with curiosity and quiet astonishment, suddenly aware that the usual family hierarchy had fractured in a single, deliberate moment. I sat back, calm and steady, letting the weight of my words settle over them like a heavy curtain. For the first time in years, I felt fully seen, fully validated, not by their approval, but by my own awareness of my worth. Each stunned glance, each pause from the people who had underestimated me, reinforced the truth I had been holding quietly inside. The tension hung thick in the air, a dramatic silence that amplified the shift, leaving no room for argument or dismissal. In that stillness, I realized the balance had irrevocably changed, and all their previous power felt hollow against the quiet certainty now radiating from me. I leaned forward slightly, letting the pause stretch just long enough for them to squirm in anticipation, then began to lay out what they had never bothered to notice. While I was quietly building my career, I received 2 promotions last year, each with bonuses you never asked about. I purchased my own apartment, fully paid, without needing anyone's approval or help. And just last month, I was recognized publicly for my work, awards, features, invitations to speak at events you wouldn't even attend. Their eyes widened, disbelief etched into every line of their faces. I could see the flicker of shame cross my mother's gaze, my father's smirk faltering. "Funny, isn't it?" I continued, voice steady but sharp. "All those years you dismissed me, overlooked my efforts, and favored someone else, I was quietly winning. And now, every word you said tonight has only highlighted your blindness." The room was silent. The laughter and mockery evaporated, replaced by tension and grudging respect. For the first time, the power of perception had shifted entirely, and I felt a deep, satisfying surge of karmic justice. They had underestimated me, and finally, it mattered. The silence stretched, heavy and almost tangible, as my parents struggled to reclaim even a shred of authority. Their smugness had evaporated, replaced by shock, embarrassment, and the faintest glimmer of regret. Every guest at the table now saw the truth. Their favoritism, arrogance, and dismissiveness had been exposed in the most undeniable way. I felt a strange calm settle over me, a warmth that had nothing to do with triumph over others, and everything to do with finally claiming my own worth. The tension that had coiled in my chest for decades began to unwind, replaced by relief, validation, and quiet empowerment. My siblings shifted uneasily, unsure how to navigate this sudden reversal, while relatives exchanged glances that said without words that the scales had finally balanced. I realized I didn't need anyone's approval anymore. The respect I had earned, silently and persistently, was undeniable. For the first time, the dinner no longer belonged to them. It belonged to me, and that ownership felt intoxicating, just, and finally satisfying. Later, as I sat alone in the quiet of my apartment, the echoes of the evening replayed in my mind. I thought about how I had walked into that dining room feeling small, dismissed, and powerless, and yet left it with a calm confidence I had never known before. The dynamic with my parents had shifted irrevocably. Their arrogance had been pierced, their favoritism laid bare, and my own voice had finally been heard. I reflected on the years of endurance, sacrifice, and silent effort that had led me to this moment, realizing that growth had been happening all along, even when it seemed invisible to everyone else. There was a bittersweet satisfaction in knowing that while I couldn't erase the past, I could redefine my present and future. I felt lighter, stronger, and more capable of setting boundaries and demanding respect. The empowerment wasn't just in their shock. It was in the understanding that my worth had never been determined by their approval. And now, finally, I could fully claim it. I stood, straightening my coat and gathering my things, feeling a calm certainty settle into my bones. The air in the dining room was thick with stunned silence, the remnants of their arrogance dissipating as I moved toward the door. I caught my parents' eyes one last time, not with anger but with quiet authority, and knew that nothing they said or did could diminish the confidence I had claimed for myself tonight. My siblings exchanged uneasy glances, and even the relatives who had once laughed at my struggles now looked at me with something resembling respect. As I stepped out into the night, the cool air brushing my face, I felt unshakable, aware that this was only the beginning. No longer invisible, no longer underestimated, I carried with me the knowledge that I could set boundaries, demand respect, and continue building my life on my own terms. And for the first time in years, it felt like I was truly free.